Welcome to War Room Impeachment. It is Wednesday, the 22nd of January, the year of our Lord 2020. We are live from Capitol Hill, just yards away from where the trial of the century is underway. We're in the evening hours. It's episode 128 of War Room Impeachment. Remember, we've been here every day, I think, since October 15th, and we will be here until the day after the acquittal or exoneration of Donald John Trump, who is now on trial for his presidency. He, in fact, is en route back from Davos. We're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network, on Salem Radio Network, on America's Voice.news, which is the premier streaming platform of the Trump revolution, and also on Newsmax TV, now in 70 million homes. My colleague Raheem Kassam, Jason, is on assignment. We decided to do tonight, the first night of the real trial, without guests so we can get into it. But the live blog has been on fire today, Raheem. Raheem, let's walk through how this started. It was Schiff, I think, did 2.5 hours up there with his opening remarks to lead off the 24 hours. He left, 19 and a half for the rest of his colleagues to start it off. And I thought it was actually pretty impressive the way he laid things out. But why don't you take it? Where are we today? What have they gone through? And where do you see the holes in this thing?
Yeah, well, so the first things first I want to get to is yesterday, right, which was the whole Adam Schiff show. What's the joke you guys like to throw out there? That's the most dangerous place in
the most DC. Dangerous place in Washington is between a microphone and Adam Schiff.
And it's now Adam Schiff. It was Chuck Schumer,
right?
Then it was the War Room, and now it's Adam Schiff. And I think Adam Schiff is showing that up there, and has been showing it up there now the last 2 days. We'll see if the stamina continues. There's no doubt that he's got the stamina for this. Something that Jerry Nadler doesn't have. Something that I don't think anybody else on their team has. He's not sleepy up there. He doesn't sort of wend and wane in his presentation of these things. He's very trial lawyer-esque when he's up there. Hakeem Jeffries is quite good, but then the team starts to drop off. Zoe Lofgren's boring. Val Demings is boring. And so really this is the Schiff show up there right now. And until unless he tags Hakeem in.
I think Demings and I think the Houston judge, Garcia, I think her name is pretty good.
Yeah, Garcia was all right.
She comes across as, hey, I'm an old Texas judge right from Houston. She plays that card.
But
right?
nobody quite had Adam Schiff's.
He had the command of the facts, and that's where he started off.
And it pains me to say this, but actually some charisma up there as well, which is something that I worry that our side might not have when it's the Trump team's time to respond. But let's quickly talk about how many people tuned in to yesterday's proceedings, because we talked this morning's show about what happened, about how the Trump legal team got jumped effectively. This was supposed to be a rules debate yesterday. They got jumped with a
President Trump did come to their defense today. He said he thought they had great emotion. It was, he said Pat Cipollone is a fantastic lawyer. I've never seen him that emotional. I've never seen him that emotionally engaged, right? So President Trump clearly liked it when I was.
Well, he liked once he corrected it. That's the point.
You think there was a little hey, read the transcript and let's start firing up.
I believe. Look, he wouldn't have said he was emotionally engaged if he didn't want him to be emotionally engaged, and he wasn't emotionally engaged in the beginning.
First three minutes.
Exactly. So there was a change. There was a client-demanded change made during the thing. They changed it, and he is well within his rights to compliment them for after that. But how many people watched this yesterday? 11 million people, according to the Hollywood Reporter, watched this yesterday across the networks. You had ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, all of them carrying it with average of 11.01 million.
Wall-to-wall coverage.
Wall-to-wall coverage. Fox got the majority, not the majority, got the largest share of that audience, 2.65 million. And then amongst the broadcast networks, only NBC continued the coverage into the evening, and they got a sizable bump as they did, 2.79 million there. Fox drew 2.63 million from 12:30 to 8 p.m. compared to 1.98 million for MSNBC and 1.46 million for CNN. So CNN coming in behind MSNBC on that. That's not a big audience, I don't think.
That was MSNBC, not NBC. It
Correct.
was MSNBC. It wasn't on broadcast. They're not going to put this on broadcast, given the bad ratings. If it was like Watergate, where you're having those kind of numbers, percentage-wise.
NBC took it into the evening. NBC took it into the evening, and the only one.
Does Hollywood Reporter think that will play out again today?
it doesn't make any predictions over that, but it does say that it does. We do make the comparison here between this and the Mueller report and the Kavanaugh proceedings, and even the original proceedings of the House impeachment show that we saw at the end of last year. This number, this 11 million, is probably less than Adam Schiff had hoped would be tuning in yesterday. It's not a horrendous number televisively, but it's not a great one. When you consider that Kavanaugh was nearly 20 million, when you consider that I think 16 million tuned in for the Mueller hearing, and I think it was 13 million in the end.
Was Kavanaugh because it was a one-day event, or was looked at as a one-day event when Ford came up and confronted him? Was that would that skew the numbers because it was a one and done?
Well, maybe, but this is the impeachment of a sitting president of the United States, and it's the first day of it, and it's the big day. You would expect that. Today will be very interesting because it will tell us, the viewership numbers that come out tomorrow will tell us whether or not the Democrats shot themselves in the foot by saying, hey, Tuesday is going to be rules day, so you don't need to bother tuning in. Wednesday's when the arguments really start. We'll see tomorrow if people really tuned in for the first day, the opening arguments from Adam Schiff and
One thing I can make an observation. I don't think the average American or even the news junkie is going to sit through 24 hours of these arguments, right? The Adam Schiff thing was over 2.5 hours, and he essentially went through, I thought in pretty good depth. So, I mean, this is why we're doing War Room Impeachment. We're doing the live blog. We deconstruct all the analysis, so you don't have to sit there and spend hours in your busy life doing this. But I don't anticipate that there's going to be a huge audience wall to wall for this. Do you think the way this is being presented, and this is to the compliment to the Democrats, they're doing it as close to a made-for-TV special as you possibly can, right? They've got videos cut in there. They've got the exhibits. They have presentation material. It's very they're trying to be as theatric as possible. Obviously, some people are more, Hakeem Jeffries and Adam Schiff are more experienced lawyers. Hakeem was over at, I think, CBS as a corporate lawyer at Paul Weiss. You've got Schiff is obviously a very experienced prosecutor. They're better than Jerry Nadler and some of the other ones, but the presentation, the production is done as a made-for-TV special.
That's right, and I think that will probably irk the president because he is a TV person. He understands what grabs and holds people's attentions, and what he'll be seeing at the moment is not just that they're prepped with what's on television in the Senate chamber, with what audio feeds they're playing, but it's so tight. It says, let's hear what this person had to say, and all the television cameras immediately switch to the feed. It's in every single person's face. Exactly, the graphics, it's very dramatic and it's very well produced. And again, here's the thing: the Democrats have the ability, and Adam Schiff has the ability to make quite a coherent case. The case that he laid out today will make sense to people the way he laid it out. It's actually much harder for the Republican side to disprove this, because what that requires is going into so much arcane detail that people will naturally zone out. Actually, Ukraine is not a U.S. ally, it's a strategic partner, and these things. And the reason I say that, and we'll get into this, let's get into the substance of what was talked about today, is this is not a legal trial you're seeing in front of you. There is very little going on that has anything to do with the law. This is a political trial. This is the type of thing you'd expect to see at a particularly exceptional mock model United Nations hearing, right? The PowerPoints, the technology is tight, and the arguments are tight from the Democrat side as well. You can see their case if you're just watching it, if you're tuning in for the first time. You can see how, President Trump made this call, and there was a shakedown somewhere down the road, and then Giuliani was over here. It will make sense to people. But what I'm worried about, Steve, I'm just going to conclude this.
Keep going.
What I'm worried about here is that there aren't going to be geopolitical arguments on our side.
Here's what I want you to address this, then we'll get into the details. We said and have been saying that, and one of the reasons is because the rapid response team and your team here in the War Room and yourself have been, and as Meadow said, very few people have been through all 7,000 pages. Now we know from the decisions made the other day, all of the evidentiary stuff that was accepted into the House came in here. Mm-hmm. So the only thing they could pull from is the Star Chamber depositions in Adam Schiff's House Intelligence Committee, right, down below, which Pat, I think, did technically make a mistake. There were Republicans down there. Meadows and Jordan and others were down there. But it's from those depositions, right, all the raw material from that, and the two sets of hearings, one at the House Intel with the Washington consensus, the other being the professors, right, on the constitutionality of it. Okay, that's the playing field. We said the entire time, and the president's not going to be digging this, to sit there and see Schiff in his cohorts curate 7,000 pages and literally weeks of depositions and testimony down to 1 24-hour. And I believe the way they're going now, they're going to take every second of it because they're just going to repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. And they don't care if they're boring the senators because they understand the senators are not the jury. They realize that most of the votes here are already cast in. There was a thing today that there's 45. There was a leak. I don't know if it was Ted Cruz or somebody said there are 45 votes already for the Republicans to dismiss, right? So the voting obviously is pretty ossified here already. They're playing to the American people and they're playing to this global TV audience. But you see what they're able to do. When you've got that 7,000 pages and you have those hours of testimony, you can curate to make a narrative. It's very little legal. In fact, it doesn't even seem like you're really in a courtroom. They're just telling a story. It's like people up there just telling a story, and all of a sudden, bang, you got a video. Bang, you got a presentation material, right? A chart or some sort of PowerPoint. For people that are coming to this, and you can tell that they're doing over and again, so no matter when you come in and out of the story, you're getting some aspect of it that this was basically a conspiracy to do this, okay? And for doing that for 24 straight hours, or 24 hours, which will be 3 entire days, then you get the defense, and your point is that even your kind of defense has got to come from the 7,000 hours or the 7,000 pages or your rebuttal. It's going to be, fairly thin gruel that you can kind of go back and punch back on this thing.
Well, this is what the Democrats understand, is that they're playing to an audience that watches television shows with suspense on Netflix, right? And every single thing for them at the moment is episodic. They're doing this, here you had the Masha Jovanovic episode. Here you have the phone call episode. Here you have the release of the aid episode. And they're doing things in these small bite-sized chunks, but they're weaving this overarching narrative together. There's something people have to get their heads around here, which is that the president's legal team is exceptionally equipped to fight a legal trial and come up with a not guilty verdict as a result of this. But like you say, the Democrats are not going for that. We have
the better lawyers. I think Rudy said the other day, we have the brilliant appellate court lawyers. There's no doubt that the legal team has, and not even bringing in Starr and Ray, I'm saying even the talent we're fielding now, these are heavy-duty lawyers. The question is, are you producing a TV show? Or are you arguing a case in a court of law? This is obviously not a court of law because the Democrats are not making a legal argument. They're basically telling a story.
They've got
the way you said it is fantastic. It's episodic TV.
That's right, and they've got their talking points, like you said, wash, rinse, repeat. They've got those down. The number of times today I've heard nonsenses, but that will stick in people's minds, such as we fight Russia over there, so we don't have to fight them over here. Right, and they repeat this. So
this is the point I want to get to. And this is one of the things I'm proud about what you guys are doing, we're doing here in the War Room, is that if you actually sit and go through it all, you can punch big holes in this, right? It doesn't really have consistency or connectivity if you're able to focus on it and look at it and kind of, tear apart the connective tissue in the episodic part of it, right? But that has to be done. I want to start, I know you're chomping the bit to get to this, and first, before we get into the episodes, give me your analysis, your assessment of Adam Schiff in his 2.5 hour. I mean, he stood up last night for 55 minutes, or yesterday, which surprised everybody, right? He comes back today with an opening salvo of 2.5 minutes, and he tried to do from high rhetoric down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, he starts very high, invoking Hamilton, talking about the risk of somebody coming along with somebody with low morals
it's
coming
a famous
along.
quote from the financial crisis of 1792, when Hamilton was advising Washington that you may see this is the typical financial crisis like in 2008, right? And that's what they were implying. You have 2008, and you have a bad guy like Donald Trump shows up on the scene that can stir the passions, right, and take away what they were implying. Hitler in the Great Depression of 32, Donald Trump in the financial crisis of 2008. I mean, Schiff used this for a specific reason. Yeah. But he went back and harkened back. He was trying to tie everything back to Lincoln, everything back to Washington, everything back to the framers, holding, I didn't know the progressive Democrats held the Constitution as they sound like Mark Levin, right? The way they were, the Constitution's everything.
Yeah, that's right. And he did put together a very impressive story up there. But again, to people, and I realize I'm in a tiny minority here, for the people who have not just gone through all the documents, but Steve, I was in the Maidan Square in late 2013. For the people who know the backstory, for the people who know that John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Masha Yovanovitch and Amy Klobuchar were there in Ukraine stirring up this trouble, to the people who know what happened with the articles of association.
What is there to walk through briefly? Why is there assumptions? Because nobody in mainstream media, CNN and MSNBC, I mean, they're throwing laurels out to Schiff that this guy is brilliant. He's laid out this magnificent case. You know the reality. Walk through why the reality is different than the story they're weaving.
And I actually watched the CBS coverage today, and it's embarrassing. As soon as these guys go to a break, as soon as they take a step away from the Senate chamber and they go back into the studio and they go to their political correspondents, hey, what did you think about that? Literally all these reporters are doing is going, yeah, sounds pretty bad. There's no analysis. They don't have any background, any purpose to this. Look, the fact is this, that if the elevator pitch is quite simple for the president's team, but as I say, I worry that they don't have the geopolitical expertise on that legal team to hammer this through. Here's how it went down. In 2013, as Hillary Clinton was leaving the State Department in 2013, the U.S. State Department, advised by the foreign policy consensus here in Washington, D.C., decided that once again they were going to try and fight a stupid war, a dumb war, to take the EU border up to Russia's border. The Articles of Association Agreement with Ukraine, effectively pulling Ukraine into the NATO and European Union sphere of influence and pushing Russia, poking the bear even further.
And knowing the history of World War II, for millennia, this has been the killing field entrance into Russia. It's something that's particularly of particular concern to them.
Absolutely. And Russia has had a number of embarrassments over the past couple of decades to do with its satellite states and its influence there. But nevertheless, for whatever reason, these guys, and remember, Obama said the 80s want their foreign policy back in 2012 when Mitt Romney brought up Russia. But just a year later, these guys were provoking a conflict there. They wanted at the time to remove the sitting president in Ukraine. This was the EU and the United States State Department doing that, right? They did it. And they replaced him with this guy, Poroshenko, who was supposed to be, quote unquote, our guy. It just turns out that Poroshenko loses an election in 2019. Suddenly everybody wants to wipe their hands of him and say, oh, he was corrupt too. This was the guy that the US and the EU sponsored to take over in that place.
Boy, we forget that, don't we?
No wonder they want to cover all this up. They have made an absolute mess of the place. We heard so many times today, Steve, 15,000 deaths now of Ukrainians on that Ukraine-Russia border. And why? So the EU and the United States and NATO could expand their influence to Russia's border. Honestly, that is the primary thing everybody needs to know from DOT. That gives you the context by which to analyze the rest of this. That gives you the context by which to analyze Burisma and Hunter Biden being on their board. It gives you the context by which to analyze the Russian relationship and the decline in relations between the United States and Russia. And it also gives you the context. Another thing we heard today was national security. We have undermined our relationship with Ukraine, an ally. Number one, not an ally, a strategic partner. Number two, I'll tell you what's undermined the U.S. relationship with Ukraine is saying, the new president, the new anti-corruption president, the guy who wasn't a politician, who's this populist centrist that rose to power fighting against Ukrainian state corruption, by calling him weak, by calling him desperate. Number two, by claiming incorrectly that these Javelin missiles were necessary to fight back the Russians on the border. Not true. Those Javelin missiles are sitting in a warehouse hundreds of miles from the border right now. They're not being used. You're calling the Ukrainians weak. These guys are alleging that Zelensky and his team are somehow colluding with this big international conspiracy. You think there's going to be bipartisan support after this?
The issue that they're making, the Washington consensus, and you'll see it over the next 2 or 3 days, is that the Ukraine's security is in the vital national security interest of the United States. And Schiff made this comment 2 or 3 times, that because it was against Russia. Do you buy that?
It makes absolutely no sense. And it makes absolutely no sense, not from our perspective, not from a right-wing perspective, not from a conservative perspective. Here's Obama gave an interview to The Atlantic, right? And The Atlantic said, Obama's theory here is simple. Ukraine is a core Russian interest, but not an American one. So Russia will always be able to maintain escalatory dominance there. And, quote, the fact is that Ukraine, which is a non-NATO country, is going to be vulnerable to military domination by Russia no matter what we do, said Obama. And he called that a realistic policy. Now, they didn't try and impeach him back then. He's effectively selling Ukraine up the river with that, saying, hey, the Russians have a bigger vested interest in the place than us. We're never going to be able to escalate to the point that they are. So he's washing his hands of it. That's why he said blankets, not missiles, by the way.
And Trump and Flynn and the whole team come in there with a very jaundiced look at the Ukraine. Because given the hot spots that we're already engaged in around the world, the South China Sea, North Korea, the Persian Gulf, you got Venezuela, you've got all these hot spots. This is, it's number 10 on a list of 5 that you got to deal with.
Steve, this is a 2016 interview with an outgoing president of the United States where he says outright, Ukraine is not our ally. They're a strategic partner. Russia's got more of a hand in there. We're not going to be able to do anything anyway about the whole situation. That's Obama. They didn't impeach him for that, and they shouldn't. And that, by the way, in a nutshell, is why the Democrats' case geopolitically doesn't make sense. That's what I fear the president's lawyers are not going to make the case of.
Okay, we're going to come back. This is War Room Impeachment, episode 128. We're live here. It's after about 6:30. They're still going on. You see on the split screen. How do people get to the live blog? What the team you guys have done today has been extraordinary, because you could watch it on TV and see this live blog and feel totally up to speed on what's going on.
And there's a chat room, so you can talk to fellow readers of the live blog at warroom.org. It is the lead story.
Be back with episode 128 in a moment.
War Room Impeachment. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome to episode 128 on America's Voice.News, the premier streaming service of the Trump Revolution, also on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem Broadcast Radio Network, and Newsmax TV. Before we get into all the clips and what you're going to walk through, Raheem Kassam's going to deconstruct what happened today, so you don't have to sit there and watch 6 hours. I want to bring on briefly, we've got Curtis Ellis from America First Priorities. Curtis is on the commercials we show all day long on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Salem. He's beating up on China. And we had him on here talk about economic nationalism. But talk about this amazing timeline you've put up, Curtis. This thing is incredible. What is it?
Yeah, the America First Action PAC team has collected for the first time and assembled all in one place all of the undisputed facts of the unprecedented effort to remove President Trump from office. This can be found, it's live on the internet now, impeachment-hoax.com, and we have the road to sham impeachment. Beginning in March 21st, 2016, when Carter Page joins the Trump campaign as a foreign policy advisor, we go through step by step, day by day, inch by inch, every movement, every event.
This is the nullification project. If you want to see the entire thing laid out graphically, you guys have done an amazing job on this.
amazing. For example, April 2016, Alexander Chalupa, Ukrainian-American DNC consultant, starts collecting information on Manafort. April 26, Papadopoulos meets with Joseph Mifsud. April 26, DNC becomes aware it's been hacked, and so forth and so on. All in one place. Kelly Sadler and the entire team went through multiple sources, from the IG report to Andrew McCarthy's ball of collusion to all the books that were out there, everything in the Mueller report, footnote by footnote, and put it all together in one place, in one straight line. And this is a reference for everybody that wants to know the real narrative.
The guys in the war room love it, so we're going to link to this thing and drive a lot of traffic there. But it's exceptional. Everybody ought to see this. And as we talked about in the first half hour of the show, Pat Cipollone and the team got to get this too, because they ought to be firing back. This ought to be the opening like Shift gave the 2.5 hour presentation a day. Your timeline ought to be the opening 2.5 hours that Pat and Jay Sekulow do on Saturday when they take the helm.
Yeah, Curtis, I'd like to enter impeachment-hoax.com into the evidence record, please.
Exactly. But that
would be a good move. And each one is footnoted, by the way. We have links to the original source material, so you don't have to take our word for it. This has all been verified. Undisputed fact.
Okay, we're going to put it up so we get a lot of traffic. Tell Kelly Sadler and the team, she's fantastic. You're doing great work over there, Brian Walsh, everybody associated with the PAC and the C3. So fantastic. Curtis, thanks for joining us. We're going to link to it right now.
Thank you.
This is the kind of detail stuff that needs to be done. I mean, this is a ton of work. We want everybody in the audience to understand. We're going to put it up on the site. We're going to drive traffic over to it. We may have an explanatory short essay at the top by tomorrow. A ton of work being done. But this is essentially the reason I want to get Curtis on here.
Who's writing this short essay, Steve?
But you're so good at that. Maybe I think Vish. I think I just volunteered Vish. But this is what you were talking about. You kind of need a counter to their narrative. This is the counter of this is the nullification project that I think they've got to drill in the senator's mind and the nation that, hey, they just told you a story, but it's a tiny piece of an overall movement of what these guys have been trying to do.
That's right. And it's a story that's being told through the eyes of people who prefer the foreign policy consensus as it has been in Washington, D.C. for the last 4 or 5 decades. That's something that a lot of people, when you're talking about this with your friends, with your family members, with your colleagues, and they say, oh, yeah, but didn't Trump do this? Remind them you're hearing a narrative from the foreign policy establishment as it has been the last 4 or 5 decades, and then ask them the question, do you like what we've had done to us and in our names and with our money on the foreign stage for the last 5 decades? Not really. People can get to grips with, actually, they lied to us about the Afghanistan war, they lied to us about the Iraq war, there's so many things, the Iran, the pallets of cash, everything. People can broadly see that Washington, D.C. and its brilliant foreign policy community, we're always hearing about this foreign policy
they never
community.
said a peep about the rise of China. Now we got an existential threat that's a real threat. And the people go, oh, gosh, look at this. Look what happened here. We're spending $7 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan.
They said something about the rise of China. They said, where can I get my check, please?
Right. They're our partners. The strategic economic dialogue.
It's
exactly so phony. It makes you. And Trump with the America First trying to stand up for it, and all you hear all day long on MSNBC. The other thing I haven't seen today, and I know they're only taking short breaks, the fire breathers and the surrogate program has got to flood the zone on everything except for Fox. Fox is fine. You got to do that, but that's talking to the guys on our side of the football. Right, you've got to take that and expand it out. Go through.
Now, I did watch Congressman Mark Meadows this morning on with Dana Bash on CNN. And he did a marvelous job for the fact that she would barely let him get a word in edgeways. I mean, she would ask a question, and then as soon as he started to reply, she would be like, no, but here's what I'm really asking, and then change the question. It was quite embarrassing for CNN. But I think that he did a good job.
We need more. He's fantastic. Okay, go through. Let's take up their argument they're laying out today. Where do you see the weakness?
Okay, so if I was facilitating the response to this, I would be looking at the big picture and then the little detail, right? You got to hit them on both. You got to hit them on the big picture stuff by calling into question the entire thing in Ukraine, the entire thing with NATO, the entire process of getting involved in this hot war on the Ukraine-Russian border with not an ally, a quote-unquote strategic partner. That's the big picture stuff. You tie that together together with what President Trump said when he first came into office. The end of this American carnage, right, where your sons and daughters are being sent to die, your hard-earned money is being squandered abroad,
blood and treasure.
Blood and treasure. And you tie that all together with why they hate Trump so much. That's the big picture stuff. On the detail stuff, there are enough inconsistencies and there are enough question marks that can be raised over the detail that it'll set the train going in people's minds like, wait a minute. Now, we've done this before on the War Room. People will recall during the House sessions. One of the things that the devil is in the detail is that Holmes-Taylor testimony. Remember, Ambassador Taylor had to come back to the House after he had already testified and say, oh, actually, a staffer of mine told me just last Friday about this phone call he overheard
at the restaurant in
Kiev between allegedly between Gordon Sondland and Donald Trump. This was the famous phone call that was overheard. We called him the eavesdropper, David Holmes. This is the famous phone call that Chris Cuomo, I think, tried to recreate on air, and he couldn't hear his mother on the phone or whatever it was, right? But there's enough discrepancy there where you can go, well, which one was it? And which one of you were lying to the House? And which one of you lied in your deposition? And which one of you lied in your testimony? Was it Ambassador Taylor who said he didn't know about this so-called phone call? Or was it David Holmes who went around saying, I told everyone, my boss, his boss, all my colleagues in the office, everybody was aware of this, but somehow Ambassador Taylor wasn't aware of it in his deposition, didn't bring it up, and then when he did bring it up, say, I only just heard of this. There are details like that which actually make no sense and call into question the entire underpinning of what they're telling us to believe. What they're telling us to believe is that there are these great patriots who serve in the bureaucratic service in America who are putting up the warning signals over this clear and present danger of a president. But I'm telling you, the case doesn't stack up. The same thing, by the way, with Kurt Volker and his text with Andrei Yermak. We're told that Volker texted Yermak and said they would get the White House meeting, quote, if we get to the bottom of what happened in 2016. Hold on. There's nothing about Biden in that text. If we get to the bottom of what happened in 2016 is everything the Democrats and Mueller were pressing the president to do. Everything the president is supposed to do per his oath of office. If he refused, can you imagine if he refused to get foreign partners involved in stopping further interference in an American election? They would have impeached him for that too. And you know what? They would have been more well within their rights to impeach him over not trying to protect American democracy, which is what he was doing, per the text messages to Volker and Yermak.
Given what you've heard today from the railhead of the argument, which was Adam Schiff, all the way down as has been passed down to Nadler and to these other aspects of it. By the way, I think they're on a 30-minute
dinner break,
and they're running a pretty tight schedule here. I mean, so they are very focused about getting through this material. Would you also go after what Curtis Ellis and the guys have just shown us with the timeline? Would you also go after the nullification project? Would you step back and say, hey, this is one small element of what they've been doing from the very beginning. In fact, they're so afraid of and terrorized by the America First construct that's away from the Washington consensus construct that the permanent political class actually was working on this even before he was elected president of the United States and go through this entire thing.
Yeah, and that's what I mean when I say the big stuff, right? You've got to attack the 50,000-foot view of this thing, and you've got to attack the detail of this thing. And you have to do it at the same time. That's why I say the Democrats have an easier job. Theirs is all sort of middle of the road, tap, tap, tap this along, episodic stuff. The way that the Republicans are going to have to argue this is, hey, you've got a massive cabal of people whose self-interest is at risk by having Donald Trump elected and re-elected this year. You also have details that don't make sense, that don't stack up. There's the question that needs to be asked, for instance, if Hunter and Joe Biden did nothing wrong, then why would a Ukrainian investigation into Burisma corruption be a quote, unfair advantage to President Trump in a 2020 election? What are they worried about coming out of the Ukrainian investigation into Burisma?
That would give him a competitive advantage.
That would give Trump a competitive advantage? And these are the questions that I think these guys need to ask. And Mayor Giuliani said something fantastic on the show the other day as well. He said if Trump hadn't made that phone call, he shouldn't be president of the United States. Doing his duty as the president by saying, hey, we've got these oil companies that have our vice president's son sitting on them. We have election interference in that same country. All the while we're handing over billions of dollars over the last 5 years to that country. We're fighting a war with Russia on that border. We're engaged with the European Union, the IMF, to do with all of this stuff as well. Wait. And remember, that's all he said. That's all the president said was wait. That's all the hold effectively was. It was the president saying the same thing as the travel ban, right? We got to figure out what's going on here.
Before we go to the politics of it, what about on the nullification project? You say it's harder. It's also harder because the whistleblower is not a witness. You don't have the evidentiary facts that you can actually bring in. This is one of the things we argued from the beginning here. If you just deal with the 7,000 pages, if you just deal with the Star Chamber and the testimony, you have a kind of a thin range of, not a broad range of action to actually launch your attack.
Look, I understand Mitch McConnell's problem here is that he needed to hold the 51 votes together on his side, right? And for the rules, and that's fine. But in doing what he did in terms of not having this full trial, the constant push for dismissal, all of this stuff, what it means is that you're creating a much harder case to make because number one, you don't have anybody from the House in there, anybody who heard the depositions in person, anybody who's gone through all of this stuff and was there when it all went down, anybody who heard the whispers, anybody who sat in this chair in the war room, you don't have anybody in there. You have a legal team, and you have a legal team trying a legal case. Well, we all know, and I think most of the American public know, there is no legal case for removing the president on this stuff, but there is a political case.
Right.
There is a case to be made whether or not the president acted ethically and morally,
right.
And that's the case that the
No, you can
lawyers
see
are
that and I'm going
struggling
to go to the TV production. Do you believe that Pat and Jay and the team have to be as savvy on the TV production to try to tell their own narrative? Because here, what you're seeing is episodic TV, right? On the prosecution's case is episodic TV.
The Democrats have made this incredibly clear that this impeachment process is a means by which they get their candidate elected in November. They've been clear about that.
Go back to this. This is the key point, because when I'm sitting there watching, I'm thinking about the 30-second spots you can pull out of this. It's pretty evident now, the way they've made this like a TV production. The game all along is what we called it. It's all that they know they can't remove him from office. This is the chop block him, and to be able to use this as an argument for the November election.
Look, if I'm and I did this for a living once upon a time, if I'm a Washington, D.C. political consultant tasked with making advertisements for my candidate that can go viral on Twitter or on YouTube, that can go on television, radio spots, this is a blessing for me. Firstly, I don't have to go out into a field with a cameraman and the congressman and his wife and kids and film all day with him skipping through the fields of wheat and whatever, right? Secondly, I have everything. I have the B-roll in there. I have everything that I want to put. My clients are being able, giving me free content of them speaking for hours and hours and hours on end. They're going to make hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars in Washington, D.C. off this impeachment process that is A, costing Americans in their money, B, costing them in their time, in their relationships with people, and it is a drain on the public morale.
Mike Bloomberg, who's said his number one priority is to remove Donald Trump from office, not to make himself president, remove President Trump from office. How he's already starting to weaponize this, right? He's taking out massive radio campaign, a massive TV campaign on impeachment. When are you actually going to see, you believe, Bloomberg's guys pulling clips from Schiff and other people's presentation?
I give it about 3 or 4 hours. I mean, maybe 24 hours, maybe 48 hours. But there's already clips floating around out there at the moment. And they're coming from both sides, right? But again, the right doesn't have as much to attack on because our people haven't spent as much time up there at the podium as the Democrats have. There is there is a problem on our side at the moment that people haven't got their heads around the fact that the impeachment process is being used as an election tool for the Democrats, right? And the other side needs to do that too. The other side needs to show that as well, rather than just saying we're going to get this dismissed. You're going to get it dismissed. You're going to win. They're not going to have 2/3.
I think
of the
this
Senate.
goes
We
back.
get that.
I think this goes back to the Pat's opening 3-minute argument yesterday, which was a brilliant, legal argument in an appellate court. What they're doing, you're up against television. What they're doing is running episodic TV. They're not interested in the legal arguments. They understand they have no legal arguments, right? They keep talking about you have to have witnesses, you have to have evidence for a thing. Well, hey, you had this much time. They don't care about that. They're weaving a narrative, and obviously a very one-sided narrative.
It was you and Bill McGinley this morning on this morning show who noted that, look, Schumer has to be collaborating with the House managers
100%.
for this production to be going
For people
right.
last night, when you go through these amendments, and Schumer would walk through A, B, C, each amendment had, each proposition they put up would have 7, 8, 9 parts to it. Very detailed, very technical. And they give Chief Justice Roberts say 2 hours to debate, one for each side, and you can hold your time. The Democrat would walk up and literally have an argument about the case and have video, have presentation. They just didn't dream it up over there at the table. They have been working on this for literally weeks. Understanding that's how organized and coordinated they were.
And Pelosi has to be coordinating with Bloomberg, and all of this is moving in lockstep.
Well, with Rachel Maddow and the people at MSNBC, this is how you get left Parnas, right? She's slow. We now know she slow walked it, and they keep bringing that up because they needed Parnas and they needed GAO, both of those. And what happened today? We wake up this morning. Last night, the guys were here at 2 a.m, and right before Showtime ends, all of a sudden you got another dump from another left-wing site that's gone in front of Tom Fitton, who's been putting FOIA requests in forever, slow walking his, but they get the ONB DOD emails,
and then they go up there as
David Brooks and the
Jason Crow, Congressman Jason Crow goes up there today, and he says the non-partisan American Oversight Organization. American Oversight is run by former Obama, Biden, and Clinton staffers, and 100% of their investigations
What's the media
have been
matters guy,
aimed
dude?
at Republicans. So how does CNN and how do these guys call them
Bipartisan.
non-partisan or bipartisan or whatever it is? That, by the way, that is an affront to every single person at home watching this
Okay,
thing.
the best thing we do now, let's go through, and how do people going through the live blog, what are you guys trying to accomplish? How are you trying to lay this out so people don't have the time to watch the 24 hours of the Democrats' prosecution case against the president? What is the best way to get it in kind of a nutshell?
Look, the thesis behind this live blog, the way we're running it, is very simple. We tell you exactly what's happening. We don't sort of change what's happening up there. We just say Adam Schiff is up there and then quote what he says. And then I give you the 30, 40, 50 word reason with a link to why he's either incorrect or what his impetus for saying what he's saying is, where we can prove what he's saying isn't true or what it links to in the past. The live blog is very punchy. We know people don't have a whole load of time to either fixate on this thing, to listen intently, or to necessarily go back and do their own research themselves. So we just provide you with the core tidbits that CNN isn't telling you, MSNBC isn't telling you, all of this stuff. And I'm shocked, Steve, I'm absolutely shocked that these guys don't have real analysts up. And I'm including Fox News in that. They don't have any subject matter experts in Ukraine, in how this whole thing started. They don't have anybody telling you what we're telling you right now, which is, hey, the Dems are all collaborating with each other. This is an election thing for them. Is the campaign collaborating with Jay Sekulow and Pat Cipollone? No, they're not going to be doing that. Certainly not to the degree that Schumer and Pelosi and the DNC is.
Okay, they're going to come back from dinner. We've got a couple of minutes left here. By the way, warroom.org is the site you can go to. Obviously, the podcast is on fire. It's over 1.4 million downloads already. Plus, we're everywhere on Newsmax, on America's Voice, Salem Radio, and the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're on Gateway Pundit on the homepage and many other sites. And one of the reasons people are coming here, they want to get the granularity. You're getting both the high and the low, the big picture, but you're also getting the details. What would you say to today's people as they come to the site and look? We got about a minute left. What would you say in your mind was the highlight of the day? Where would you tell people to focus their attention?
I think, look, you can go through the live blog, and there's all sorts of nice tidbits in there. It's not going to take you all day to go through that. It's very simple, very punchy. That was very good. You also can get a good look into some of the dismantling of the evidence records in there, and the podcast pulls from this morning. We're getting so many compliments over Bill McGinley and Senator Mike Braun this morning. People really appreciated them being on. And very critically, again, something that nobody else will tell you, who is this American Oversight Group that got the OMB emails? We have an entire post up on that. You can read that in all the gory detail, and we walk you through everything to do with that as well. We're very grateful for everybody that shares this podcast, and we're
get it out to all your
soaring up the
friends.
rankings.
Okay, we're going to be doing two-a-days for the entire time while the trial of the century goes on and the crime of the century. Tomorrow morning, we're honored to have Kimberly Guilfoyle and David Rifkin, the great constitutional lawyer. And Kimberly is she's a fire breather. They will be on to deconstruct everything that went on with Raheem and Jason overnight. We're also going to be back on tomorrow night at 6 o'clock to give a snapshot of what's going on and to deconstruct what happened during the day. Trust me, people kind of know the overall where this is going to come out, but every day is a different day. And I tell you, they're trying to pull every trick in the book. They had this core dump last night of emails. Where else can people go to get information about us? And what we need reviews.
We do need reviews at warroom.org, and go to your podcast platform and find out everything. Just type in War Room Impeachment War Room or Bannon's War Room or any of the combination of those, and you'll get this on your podcast app. Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter at WarRoom2020. We have a new video out on there.
And also to get to the live chat, get on the live chat. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we'll be back on War Room Impeachment.